Well, hi, Jay. Happy Friday. It is such an honor to have you on our show today. My first question for you is, Jay, tell us about your story. Let's start from the very beginning. How did your post secondary experience lead you to where you are today?
Yeah. Gosh, Alina, it's so good to see you. You're always so bright and cheery. Just looking back, I feel old now saying this, but post-secondary was a long time ago for me. I was an arts kid. I'm from Vancouver, went to UBC and did a bachelor's of political science. But I was kind of like the wannabe business student and got into a minor in commerce, which kind of satiated that need on that side, but got super involved in everything from Latin dance passion. Don't ask me to salsa dance now. I probably can and will break a back or something. To Toastmasters for the public speaking aspect, and then Alpha Kappa Psi, which is like a business fraternity. And so I got really involved in different things that throughout my university career encouraged me to grow. Post secondary, after uni, post sec, ended up at a Fortune 500 company called ADP, and I started in sales there, got my feet wet. And then as I learned more and more, got into this role where I developed a cross border expansion niche. So I helped our American clients move internationally, right? So, for example, Salesforce wanted to open an office in Vancouver. Tom's Shoes wanted to go to China for a little bit. And so helping walk them through how to do that. And that was fun for a little bit, but I hadn't really scratched the entire business need. And so I went to Ivy to go do my MBA and loved it, absorbed so much. But it helped me land what I thought at the time was my dream job, where I met you, was over at Deloitte as a management consultant. An amazing, amazing profession, right? Still very much in love with it. Got to do a lot of human capital type work for a bit. And at Deloitte, I stumbled into the healthcare industry out of all places. Yeah. I see that look of shock on your face. But, as consultants, we tend to work across industries, right? Whether it's oil and gas or finance or retail, selling a bunch of yoga pants, that kind of thing. But I was privileged enough to fall into a few health provincial type work, like transformation work. And I think it was the first time in my career that I really found meaning behind the work that I was doing because everything that we did translated into serving the public good. And so loved it. And now I moved over to TELUS Health a few years ago to head up strategy and transformation in the virtual care platform in their portfolio. And so, yeah, I'll stop rambling. I'll throw it back to you. But any follow up questions or any insights there?
Well, I just want to say, I think one of the best things that happened to me at Deloitte was that we met through Illuminate when Deloitte sponsored the Vancouver conference. And you've always given me just so much incredible insights into how to become a better employee, for example, at Deloitte, and how do you activate on leadership and especially thought leadership. I follow all your posts on LinkedIn and I find them so
Thank you.
inspirational. And by the way, Jay also has a podcast. Jay, would you like to tell us about your podcast as well?
Yeah, it's called Progress, Not Perfection. And I love, love, love the fact that you mentioned activating leadership because that's what it's about. How do you activate leadership from a citizen centric perspective? So, how do we do things that matter for the rest of us, right, within society? And so I get to interview a ton of leaders who do that. Thanks for that plug in. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Jay, did you change the name of your podcast? I remember it was a different name before.
Yeah, it was much more aggressive. It used to be called Millennials with Machetes because we were hacking our way through the thick of life. And as I've grown, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I could interview people other than millennials with machetes. And so, yeah, definitely a bit of a rebrand as I look to the next chapter.
That's so funny. I mean, you could have rebranded it into Leaders with Machetes, but I guess that would also be aggressive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, love the new title. Can't wait for your upcoming episodes. Can't wait for all of your adventures. I'm going to dive into the next question. So, Jay, as we know, the job market is constantly changing and evolving. In fact, in today's job market, some of the most in demand jobs didn't even exist 5 or 10 years ago. What are some of the main traits and skills an individuals should develop in order to succeed in today's fast changing business world?
Yeah. It's so fascinating having this conversation in the lens of AI. And this past week, Google barred smashing heads with Microsoft and ChatGPT. And as there's all this talk about automating work, it brings us back to what's the future for us, right? Where do we focus in on? And I think at the heart of it, to keep things really simple, I think it's the soft skills. And it's always been that, by the way. Nothing's changed for the past 20 years. The most important skills you could develop are two critical soft skills. One is public speaking and presentations, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to be able to manage up, manage down, coach executives, advise executives. And as you get into that space where you get to do that, the more you can present yourself in a way that's empowering and powerful, if you have the presence, that carries you a long way. The second one I would say is critical thinking, from structured critical thinking. I wish I had a million people who could really dig deep into just thinking through problems. Because I think ChatGPT, right? Great example. I'll fire at a problem and it'll give me a pretty good response. But there's that next level past that that I think hopefully won't be replicated or duplicated by bots. But for us to be able to process a lot of things with human insight is invaluable. And so structured critical thinking would be a second soft skill that I'd recommend.
So, Jay, you are incredibly successful and you work with a lot of senior leaders. Now, I'm just wondering when you're advising folks who are a lot older than you, how do you hold a powerful and genuine and influential presence?
Yeah. A, don't have to rush. Don't rush it. I see so many people actually with this, I wouldn't even say it. Let's not call other people out. Let's just talk about me for a bit. When I was younger, I would walk into a room with an executive and I would get so nervous, right? I'd walk in and everyone's kind of staring at you and my heart would start beating. And then all of a sudden they'd be like, Jay, what do you think? And I would have something ready, but I would try to get through it so fast. I'd be like, here are my 20 bullet points. Bleh. I would just regurgitate it. And so my A would be pause. Don't rush it. There's so much power even now in just stopping and waiting. And you're like, what's Jay going to say next? There's that bit of leaning in that way. And then B, fight with facts, right? There's going to be a lot of opinions in the rooms, a lot of different perspectives. At the end of the day, a lot of people are really logical. They got there because they are very good at navigating cultures but also understanding what drives business results and organizational results, right? And so fighting with facts is presenting exactly what the facts are, identifying what the insights are behind that. And this is the last piece that most people miss is what's my recommendation? Right? Can I recommend something? Can I have a point of view based on what I have in front of me, the data in front of me to say, here's what I think we should do. Right. And so many people are a bit scared to say that because, well, what if it's wrong? That's okay. Executives respect that. They're like, well, great idea, but now we're going to go a different way. And at the end of the day, that allows you to learn how to deal with that discomfort of being wrong and how do you show up in those moments too. So hopefully that helps.
I think I hear the powerful combo is soft skills and facts. Soft
Yeah.
skills and facts, and you'll
Yeah.
always win.
Yeah, and you gotta go in that way too, like a cowboy. You're waving your fingers around. So like soft skills, effects. Yeah, as you yeah.
I love this. I love this. Okay. My next question for you, Jay, is landing a job is becoming increasingly more competitive in today's market. In fact, I think COVID kind of changed the way we work and the future of work. So, what are some tips you can give in terms of crafting a standout cover letter resume? How can an individual, especially one just starting out in their career, leverage the power of LinkedIn and networking to build a strong connection and a personal brand that sells?
Content. You talked about LinkedIn posts that you saw me write, and I'm probably like on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of quality of output, to be honest. I see so many good creators out there who are younger than I am, who have so many great points of view. And building a brand on LinkedIn is one of those things that you can do by pushing out videos, adding captions at the bottom that are engaging, keeping your videos super short to like 60 seconds and saying, boom, here's my insight and my point of view on this. I think I've started to do that with different forms of content that's not video yet, but more written, where it's here's my point of view on Toyota and their Prius strategy for the year. Here's my point of view on Microsoft and their extend, embrace, extinguish strategy. And so there's a lot of like different ways you can provide thought leadership. And so as you connect with people at companies who you're trying to apply to or get into, them being able to see that has huge value. The second recommendation I'd have is tailor, tailor, tailor. Not the guitars, not T Swift, right? Tailor your messaging and your communication with everyone. Well, I think when you reached out to me on Instagram, we're friends and I would have said yes no matter what, but you're so good at saying, hey, Jay, loved XYZ podcast episode, loved your XYZ post on LinkedIn, would love to connect, right? So you're immediately appealing to the work that I'm doing. I'm like, yes, I feel so validated by Alina. Of course, I would say yes to whatever she's saying, right? And so people will help people that they like. Obviously, you and I, right, same wavelength a lot of the time. And I think moving forward, it goes both ways, right? Where if you ever had something that you needed help on, I'd be like, yes, because we have that relationship, right? And so Taylor, Taylor, Taylor.
I love it. Taylor, Taylor, Taylor. And this reminds me of a conversation I had with Erica in human capital, who used to be my manager, Erica Hamill, I think you might know. And she was such a great mentor. And she said something that changed my life. I don't think, I necessarily learned about this growing up or in university, but one day she pulled me aside and she said, Alina, if people don't like you, why would they want to help you? And so it made me realize that
Yeah.
in order to succeed, it's all about the people game. It's
Yeah.
because there's always going to be people who can do better things than you, who are more skilled and talented. At the end of the day, it's the relationship, how you make people feel about themselves. And also, are you being genuine? Do you genuinely care about this person?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. I don't know if any of your other guests have mentioned this book. They probably have. This book's 130 years old, probably, but it's still valid today. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's one of those titles that everyone's like, ugh, that sounds kind of schemy. But it's, to your point, it's authentic. It's a very clickbaity book title, of course, right? But the content in there is all, how do you connect with people at a genuine level where people are liking you, and then where do you go from there, right? So love it.
And lately, a new thing I discovered is, what can you offer to people in your network? What are your values? And as cliche as that sounds, I think, for example, with my friends, that the friends who I grew up with, we're always just going to be friends because we've seen each other just at our wars and also just being incredibly silly. But as I get older, I realize the connections or the friends that I have when it comes to business, you always have to position, what can you give before you ask? And I also think that's super valuable as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, love it. I think TD as a bank recently shifted to how can I make your day better? Maybe not recently, 5 years ago. The main question a CSR should be asking is, how can I make your day better? Right. And that's it. It's just, how can I be of value, to your point, right? Or support or service or whatever it is, right? How can I lean in? Where are you today? And how can how do you think I could be helpful? So, yeah.
So, Jay, let's talk a bit more about the interview. We talked about resume, cover letter, how to win people and friends. Let's talk about the interview. So, this is an area where a lot of applicants fail to prepare, right, or make avoidable mistakes. What are some tips you have so that an applicant can ace the interview and build an impression that matters?
Yeah. And maybe we'll use me as a bad example, and we'll use this as an interview as a live case study, right? But my advice would be, think in tweets. So give people the headline before you dive into your response. So if you think about some of the questions you've been asking me so far, right? You're like, what do you think I should do? Blah, blah, blah. And sometimes I've been like A, and then I'll explain all of A, and then I'll go B, and I'll explain all of B. One thing I could have done better there is to actually give you both A and B up front, to say the best skill you could develop is public speaking. And then the other soft skill that you could develop is, I forget what I just said, but whatever those two were, right? That's your tweet. That's your headline. It's your first statement that you say when you respond, right? So for this question that you just asked me, think in tweets was my immediate tweet, right? That's it. And now we're diving into the actual answer, and I'm able to explain my thought process behind that. but you're able to follow it along because at the end of the day, if you remember absolutely nothing from our conversation, you might remember one thing, think in tweets, right? For that. And so with interviews, it translates into where am I leading the interviewer with my response? How do I elaborate on that story? And then how do I bring them back and say, yeah, remember, my answer was think in tweets or whatever it was. So does that help a little bit?
That is so interesting, Jay. I've never heard of those before. But tell me, what was the most interesting thing you said to an interviewer in one of your interviews?
Oh, nice. Curveball question. I like this. What is the most interesting thing I've said? Yeah, so if I think in tweets and I'm trying to come up with something right now, I'm trying to buy myself a little bit of time too. That the question, tell me about yourself, is going to come up, right? That's going to come up. And so many people botch that because, and I'll get to my interesting story. So many people botch that because they think to themselves, oh, here's my resume. Here's what I did in 2019. Here's what I did in 2020 and blah, blah, blah. But there's no upfront framing of who you are as a person. And so automatically right off the start of the bat, how I normally kick off is my name is JQ. I'm probably the only person ever in the world that will introduce themselves as with two letters for their full name. So that's how my name's pronounced. JQ. You're not going to forget it. And people are like, oh my gosh, that's so weird. I respond, yeah, my parents thought it'd be funny because they were DJs. And so I have these interesting nuggets that I start to drop in right at the start of the interview where they're like, your parents were DJs? And so all of a sudden I'm giving them hooks that they can lean into. Oh, JQ, that's a weird last name. Where's Q from? And I'm like, I'm so glad you asked that. My background's Singaporean. And so Q is a Singaporean last name. And we haven't even talked about my professional experience yet, right? They asked me, tell me about yourself. And right off the bat, I'm able to share a little bit about who I am as a person, right? They know my parents are DJs. They know I'm Singaporean. They know I have an interesting last name. And we were barely a minute into the interview, right? So thinking about how to frame that before you even dig into that, that's one of the most interesting things I've shared about myself or said in an interview.
That is so cool. I'm just trying to think next time I interview, how should I introduce myself? Because my name is not as cool as yours, JQ. Mine is Alina Huang, and it's kind of boring. I need to think about a way. Huh. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go think on that.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be about your name. It could literally be about anything else, right? But like something to introduce you as a person rather than you as just like another name, because they're seeing so many candidates and so many applicants as they interview candidate after candidate after candidate. And so
Yeah,
how do you
yeah.
stick out? How do you be memorable, right? I think it's the personal
Mm.
aspect that helps a lot.
Mhm, mhm. And it makes me wonder, interviewers, they interview so many candidates. They must be so exhausted all the time. And if a candidate comes in and the presence is so strong, like, hey, what's up? My name is Alina and I'm gonna ace this interview. How are you? It can come off as a bit fake and almost not genuine. And I think maybe sometimes at the end of the day, it's these most genuine conversations, these most easygoing introductions that allow you to
Yeah.
build a connection with the interviewer.
Yeah. And the more unique the fact is, I think the stronger. I can still think of candidates who've opened their interview with, yeah, I used to they did HR for Marriott in Bangkok, right? And right off the bat, nobody ever says that to me. And so for me to recall that almost instantly, it's very easy for me to then be like, oh, yeah, I remember that candidate. She was sharp and here's what she did. And so, anyway, bit of a tangent there, but unique personal aspects is the takeaway here.
Mhm. I love it. Okay, last question for you, Jay. Given the interesting times that we're in, what is one piece of advice you would offer to someone currently just striving to attain their dream career?
A heavy question. It's almost like asking me to solve the world's problems, but I love it. The one thing, cheesy, follow your dreams piece, but I think bet on yourself in a really thoughtful way where you can pursue your interests. If you're going to bet on yourself, that piece is something that I don't see realized enough. I think you do a really good job of it with Illuminate, betting on yourself, but also your network and the people that are going to work with you and lift you up and collaborate with you, right? So the second part is betting on yourself in a way that really allows you to hone in, grow, master your craft with something that you're interested in. And for you, it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it feels like you're really all about the next generation, Really all about how do we look ahead beyond today to say, how do we shape the next generation of leaders, change makers, right? People who make effect on the world. And so I think you've really nailed that in terms of who you are, right? Good example right there, right? Like you bet on yourself, you followed your interests, and you can hone and continue to refine that craft. It'll keep you engaged for so long, your entire career, perhaps. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun game. I want to say life is a game. And you make so many bets every day. And I like to think of it as an adventure. But I want to throw this question back to you. What is your passion, Jay?
Yeah. So I know, so I don't probably only know this because we're on IG together, but you love singing. You look so embarrassed right now. I love this. But same. And I'm such a shoddy singer compared to you. But what I love is creating. And creating can span anything. You have a social media content creator lens, right? But you also have creation from a standpoint of writing, creating decks from a consulting point of view, creating workshops or environments where people can step into. And so for me, it's all about, can I be in a career where I'm just constantly creating stuff that's different and unique and innovative and pushing the bar a little bit higher? That's where I'm at.
You got me when you said creating decks. That's the highlight.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people shoot on consultants because they're like, oh, all they do is create decks. And some consultants hate that too. I love that part of our job because it actually allows you to just synthesize information in the most meaningful way possible. And that goes back to executive presence. It goes back to communicating and synthesizing information. Anyway, but yeah, creating.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much, Jay, for being on the show today. As always, thank you for your wisdom, and it's such an honor to be in your presence.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, Alina.
Until next time, bye.